Is there any obligation on your bank to stop you sending all your life savings to fraudsters? And if you do that, is there any duty on the bank to try to get your life savings back again? If this was like proper clickbait, I'd say, oh, wait to find out. But I'll tell you now, the answers are no, and possibly, but we don't know yet. So why am I talking about this? There was a House of Lords case today, as I still call them, even though it's the Supreme Court. See my other video about the carpets. The background facts are quite interesting. A couple were approached by some people purporting to be from the Financial Conduct Authority who were investigating, so they said, possible accounting fraud involving the couple's accountants and their bank. And they said, oh, the first thing we need to do is to protect all your money, because that's about £700,000 in life savings. And they arranged to move the money to the safe accounts. Now, these people, they were quite plausible. They'd managed to spoof the numbers, so when they were ringing up on mobile phones, it showed up on a number that was actually the Financial Conduct Authority. But that's, relatively easy to do. The bank, however, became very suspicious about this and said, well, hang on, who are these people that you transfer? This just isn't right. You can't do this. But the fraudsters said, oh, don't tell the bank we're investigating you, them. They can't find out or anything. So instead of saying, well, we've been told to move this to a safe account, they said, oh, no, it's just a business deal. We've dealt with these people before. It's all kosher. And like I said, the bank were really, really, really suspicious. And they alerted the police. And the police came around and actually attended and said, we think you're being defrauded. We think these, are scammers. For some reason, they sent the police away. And again, when, they tried to transfer the money and the bank rang and said, this just seems really, really, really suspect. Again, they actually apparently lied to the bank. And they said, no, you don't understand. It's a business deal. We've got to do it. We're going to lose out on the contract if we don't do it immediately. The bank still tried to, not send it. But in the end, they just had to. Because they said, well, we have to obey any lawful instruction of the client, regardless of whether we think it's a good idea or not. So anyway, this goes, guess what? Turns out they were fraudsters. So the money's vanished. And they rang the bank and said, oh, it turns out these are fraudsters. Can you get our money back, please? But by which time it had been dissipated. So they sued the bank. And the argument was you had a duty of care to protect us from fraudsters. At first instance, the court said, well, first of all, this was clearly your own fault. But anyway, just generally, banks don't. It's not a bank's job. They're not financial advisors for them to say whether they think something is a good idea or a bad idea, or you might be even being ripped off, or it's dodgy. They say, your bank account basically entitles you for them to move money around as you instruct. And they said, it would actually be a breach of the contract if they didn't abide by your instructions. You could sue them. Like, for instance, you've not transferred the money in time and I've lost out on a contract. So they're saying the bank owes absolutely no duty of care whatsoever in any circumstances, and especially in this particular case where you lied twice to the bank to force them to transfer this money. So that went to appeal, and actually at appeal, the appeal court said, you know what, yeah, I think the bank might have a duty of care. Where it's something that clearly is an obvious fraud, generally they might have. And they said, we're not saying that this case fits that, but we're saying the judge was wrong to reject, you running this argument. Because, they said, well, your arguments are relevant because the bank doesn't have a duty anyway. They said, well, maybe we should say, yes, the bank does have a duty of care to protect people from fraud. But, it's all going to be very, very fact-based as to, is the fraud obvious? Should it be apparent to the bank? But anyway, this actually ended up going to the Supreme Court because, it was considered to be a point of general importance. And the Supreme Court have overturned that. And they said, no, first court got it right. Absolutely no duty of care on a bank whatsoever. They're not financial advisors. It's for you to make sure you know who you're dealing with. Because otherwise, every time you click on some dodgy link on the internet, you could just do it safely and go, well, if it turns out I get ripped off, I'll just get the money back from the bank. So they got knocked back on that. However, they also had a second claim, which they said, well, even if the bank had no duty to stop us sending the money, they had a duty to try and get it back as quickly as possible, and they didn't. Now, what the court has said is that is an arguable point. We're not saying it's right or wrong, but the first court had just kicked it out, and the appeal court didn't deal with it. They said we're not saying it's right. Your particular circumstances are right or wrong, but there is certainly an arguable case that once you've alerted a bank to a fraud, then they do actually have to try and get into top gear and get a shift on and try and get it back. I mean, they're saying in this case we don't know if that is quite correct, but also everything's going to be very fact-based, and we haven't looked into when you alerted them or what they actually tried to do. So there you go. So it's just a warning to be very, very careful. I mean, you don't have any protection when you're dealing with somebody. If they're a stranger, it's there's no duty whatsoever on a bank to protect you from fraudsters. So just watch out for yourselves. And if you liked that, please consider clicking the like button and also possibly even subscribing. And I'm not asking you for any money, so feel free to send some, but I guarantee you'll never get that back.